Γεια σας και καλώς ήρθατε στο euronews. Η ιστορική ένταξη της Φινλανδίας στο ΝΑΤΟ έδειξε ότι τελικά συνέβη ακριβώς το αντίθετο από αυτό που επεδίωκε ο Βλαντιμίρ Πούτιν. Δηλαδή, αντί η Βορειοατλαντική Συμμαχία να αποδυναμωθεί στη ρωσική μεθόριο, διευρύνθηκε με την ένταξη της Φινλανδίας, μιας χώρας που τηρούσε τη στάση ουδετερότητας εδώ και χρόνια. Πώς οδηγήθηκαν όμως τα πράγματα εκεί και τι ακριβώς σημαίνει αυτό για την Ευρώπη και την ίδια τη Φινλανδία, θα συζητήσουμε τώρα αμέσως με τον καθηγητή Πολιτικής Επιστήμης στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Ελσίνκι, Τέιβο Τεϊβάνεν. Hello and welcome to Euronews. Finland became the 31st member of the North Atlantic Alliance. Let's start with the importance, the significance of your country's succession to NATO after decades of neutrality. What does joining NATO mean for your country?
Most people in Finland think it means increased security against most imaginable threats by Russia. Of course, if there is a major conflict between NATO and Russia, it might mean that Finland becomes a frontline country, which might be complicated. It also means a little bit symbolically like becoming more clearly part of the West, Finland sometimes being seen as between East and West. And it means security, national security will be emphasized a little bit more. And as we've seen with Turkey, for example, now in the accession process, human rights concerns may be emphasized a little bit less in order to please our NATO member allies, such as Turkey, Hungary, and the United States.
So are there concerns among the people in Finland about security?
Well, that there was an initial concern about what might happen between Finland announcing we want to join NATO and actually getting inside and getting the protection of the fifth article. That time passed without major concerns. People started thinking like, well, Russia is busy in Ukraine and doesn't seem militarily so strong in any conventional warfare kind of thing. So people have not been afraid of, Russian invasion or anything like that. There's always the risk of something else, nuclear attack or cyber attacks or things like that. But now I think people feel a little bit more safer in any foreseeable circumstances in Finland.
A year after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, Moscow, we could say, got exactly the opposite from what was the original goal. Instead of weakening NATO in its borders, NATO enlarged. So what does this enlargement mean for NATO and the West in general?
Well, of course, NATO becomes a little bit stronger by adding a new member and perhaps soon another one. And also by having another border area with Russia, it means that Russia will perhaps feel a little bit less secure because there might be in conflict situation threats from different directions, and it's natural Russia will somehow respond to that. In some sense also, yeah.
Do you think that Europe is going to turn the page as far as concerns its security? Will Europe do more efforts to protect its security?
Well, it's difficult to see how the security situation in Europe will develop, and I don't think Finland and possibly Sweden accessing NATO will make any I don't think they will make any game-changing differences to the security situation in Europe, even if they arguably increase security of Finland as such. So we might be going towards a little bit more turbulent times. Much depends on how the conflict in Ukraine develops.
Just hours before the official ceremony, the Russian Defense Minister, Sergei Shoigu, said that Finland's NATO accession creates risk of a significant expansion of conflict. This is at least a covered threat. How do you think Moscow will react to Finland's accession to NATO?
It has seemed that after initial fears, Then based also on some comments by Putin himself and Foreign Minister Lavrov, the reaction was a little bit like, okay, Finland is joining in itself, but other possible reactions might depend on what position Finland takes vis-a-vis possible permanent bases of NATO in Finland or the presence of nuclear arms. And Russia has stated that those will be issues they are watching clearly when they think about reactions. There might be some reactions. Right now, there's a service of denial attack happening against Parliament of Finland. It's not so unusual, and it just happens at the same moment when Finland is finally joining NATO. We might see more of cyber war kind of situations, but it's hard to predict. Right now, it seems fairly tranquil.
How is the atmosphere in Helsinki? What do people think about their country's accession to NATO? You said they feel safer, but I'm asking this because there were decades when Finland was neutral.
Yes, it was a big change in Finnish mentality from neutrality at some moment, then not so neutral as member of European Union, but non-aligned in military terms, and now entering a military alliance. Some people are opening bottles of champagne, other people are quite indifferent, others, a minority, are not so happy and feel concerns about Finland joining an alliance with countries with bad human rights records, and also the possibility that Finland will be involved in conflicts more than before.
Was NATO one of the important political issues on the political agenda before the recent elections in Finland, in which Finnish voters gave a boost to conservative parties? Was that connected?
Still 2 years ago, many were thinking that this election in Finland would be much about NATO and foreign policy. But since there was such a strong consensus last year around NATO membership, it wasn't really an issue in the elections. You could see it a little bit in the fact that those few members of parliament who voted against NATO membership, many of them were not re-elected. You could also see it in the fact that many candidates with military backgrounds or security analysis backgrounds were elected in the parliament. But overall, it doesn't seem to have played such a big role in the way political swing happened in Finland towards somewhat more conservative position.
So which was the key issue?
The key issue was the economy. On the one hand, the left and the center left emphasizing need for social welfare, public services, and in general public spending, and the right-wing alternative talking about fiscal discipline and need for budget cuts in order to avoid budget deficits and further debt of the Finnish state. There were other issues, migration, that tends to play and did play in the hands of the Finns party, an anti-migrant party, and then issues like environment and foreign policy did not play a big role in this electoral moment.
So you think that Finnish voters were trying to find a solution to their economic problems, voting for a conservative party?
Well, as always, it was dividing along fairly classical lines. Those who are leaning more towards the left wanted and would like to see more emphasis on public spending, welfare, elderly care, healthcare, and more right-wing oriented people wanting to see fiscal cuts. The differences with the last election were not so big. So the rightward and conservative swing was not huge. It was just big enough to get two conservative parties just a little bit ahead of Sanna Marin's Social Democratic Party, which also did quite well in Finland. Normally in elections, the party that has had prime minister's post tends to lose support quite a lot. Sanna Marin's Social Democratic Party got more votes and more seats in the parliament than 4 years ago, and this is seen actually as something that partially has been boosted by Sanna Marin's popularity in Finland.
Thank you very much for this discussion.
Thank you.